by asking Ryan Gallagher, the CEO of iVox, to come up on stage. He's going to talk about AI-driven customer interaction, creating high-quality leads.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you're all caffeinated and had enough beverages. So I'm Ryan. I'm the founder and CEO of iVox. I'm an engineer by trade, so I've worked for ISPs, some of the largest companies in the world. I worked for Compaq before they got bought by HP, and basically building big-scale infrastructures and big products. I was involved in a lot of streaming, video and audio work on the backbone internet, which was probably one of my most interesting jobs before I jumped into startups. So, iVox. We power property portals all over the world, and we've done so for over a decade. So that is interesting, but the most interesting thing is we were talking about data the other day, and we're talking about data being promiscuous because it's available on the web, so the value decreases because it gets pulled in by all these different sources. We have a different type of data. We have private data. So we have billions of conversations. We have billions of parameters to train models. We have decades worth of information which is relevant to the property industry globally. And we run this all on our own closed models on our own hardware. So we don't use ChatGPT or anything else. And we've been doing this for quite a while. So I'll come through some of the examples of what we're doing. But we work with a lot of the big brands that you see and a lot of the ones that you don't see there as well. We're also live in over 60 countries, and we are a tier 1 carrier. So we buy our numbers off regulators in many countries. So I'm going to talk about sort of AI as I see it, and then 2 different ways to approach it. And at the end, I'll kind of sum up some of the examples of things that we're doing now. So this is the AI S-curve. So almost all technology comes in this sort of shape. And you can get into more details if you look at the Gartner hype curve. But basically, things slowly trickle out, and then you get this hype train, which is everybody's putting AI on everything. Everybody is calling anything that's even remotely smart AI, and half it doesn't work. This happened with mobile, this happened with the web, it happened with everything. And then it slows down and you start to get actual pragmatic solutions. So people start to make business cases, people start to make things which make money, ROI. And that's kind of, we're coming to the end of the hype cycle just now. We're still not out of it, but we're starting to get to the point where we'll start to see real world solutions make money. So AI is not new either. It's been around for quite a while, and it usually works on a schedule where you first have to build trust and then improve as you go. So spell check is a good example of that, where originally it would underline a word and say, hey, we think you've spelled this wrong. And then it moved to autocorrect. So it would just correct it for you because at this point it knows what it's doing. And then it predicts, so it auto-prompts you for, I think you're about to type this in. So it gets smarter and smarter as it goes. Spam checking for email is a similar sort of model. But there's some horror stories out there. There's a really bad but good case study in France where they've created an AI bot which was to help doctors reduce their workloads, and it started suggesting suicide to people. It does actually reduce the workload of doctors, but ethically it's somewhat questionable. And then McDonald's released their little chat bot for the drive-thru where it just continuously ordered more food. So there's one video online where they've got 260 chicken McNugget orders, and they're continuously saying, stop, 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 but it doesn't stop. There's the lawsuit where in the US somebody decided to find prior cases, so they decided to ask ChatGPT for other cases that had been solved like this. ChatGPT completely made up these cases and decided to present them. It was taken to court where they found out these cases didn't exist. They were completely made up. And we've seen it ourselves playing with LLMs. We had one LLM where we decided that we couldn't figure out if it could connect to the external world or not. And we asked it, and it said, yes, I can connect to APIs, websites, etc. We then, to test it, asked it to pull back the iVox.com website's code, which it did, which was great until I read it. It was not our code. It was completely made up. And then I asked it, did you just make that up? And it said, yes, my job is to please. So I'm sorry if I went too far in that. But this whole web page was completely made up. It mentioned iVox a couple of times, but that was it. So Gen AI is designed to generate. It's designed to generate content. So it will make things up. It will lie to you. Be very careful. So how do you get around it? Don't use OpenAI. If you use OpenAI, you're giving your data like Samsung did. They gave their code base to the world because they put it into an open AI, which then belongs to the internet. It's used to learn. So always keep your eye on privacy and ethics as well, coming back to the doctor example. And test. You have to test a lot. Prompting is incredibly hard. You need to do this again and again. And you can layer models. If anyone wants to talk about this level of stuff, I'm around. I love chatting about this. But you can layer models so that you're not using a single model. You can use multiple models to correct each other. There's a big article on our blog about LLMs against SLMs. LLM is a large language model, SLM is small. So they're more focused on what they're trying to achieve, so they're more accurate. And RAG is a technology to pull information from external data sources. We're coming out with RAG 2 at the moment, but don't rush it is my advice. You will end up in one of my presentations next year if you do. So, two main areas we look at is data and automation. So I will go into details on those. So the big issue with data is complexity versus simplicity. We get tons and tons of data. Every year it increases more and more as we're able to find out more data. We have to be very careful not just to provide haystacks to customers. We have to actually pull the needles out and show them these needles, because otherwise we just overload somebody who's already overloaded. So we always have to take a huge amount of data and simplify it. So on the micro level, we do this with calls. Or this could be an SMS, call, email, we track it all. And you can pull back certain information. So by default, we pull back natural entity recognition. That's names mentioned, addresses mentioned, times and dates. Action items. So we suggest 3 action items. Don't forget to follow up with James about his birthday, which is coming up, by the way. So everyone pay attention to James's birthday coming up. We provide a summary of the call. We provide scores, and we can provide sentiment analysis. All of our information in our entire platform is available via the API too. So you can see it on our site, but you can also push this into your CRM systems. You can push it into whatever data sources you present to your customers. And you can also interact with these calls by asking just generic questions on this. Macro. So that's on a bigger scale. So obviously we see billions of calls. So we are able to put trends together. We're able to predict what's going to happen. We can score different agencies or different agents. We can score countries against countries. We can see how many of your calls resulted in a mortgage buyer, how many resulted in a viewing booked, and how many were led by a viewing discussed that didn't result in a viewing booked. So you can then create different behavior trees for these different outcomes of calls on the individual level, but you can also look at them in trends and see what you're doing to generate calls, which do generate these more valuable leads. And you can use it to train your staff. We have a lot of customers. For example, we have customers who consider a close rate to be an appointment booked. We had one place with 1,000 different locations. They had some which had a 42% conversion rate and some which had a 95% conversion rate. So they used our data to train them all to get them up to a higher level of close rate. We can categorize and classify and suggest things as well. But you can use this to improve your customer experience, because your customers are not just real estate agents. Your customers are also people coming to the website, and you have to balance between the two and make sure that the person who phones up gets a response, gets an answer, and is dealt with professionally and properly. Otherwise, your brand is the one that's going to get hurt. So the next section is on automation. So there's 2 different things. There's replacement and augmentation, and I'd love to have an argument with people about this, but I believe augmentation is basically the way forward for the general populace. And what I mean by that, I'm talking about replacing or augmenting humans. So we believe you can improve the human. Basic tracking does this. Answer rates, basic things like that. We can suggest actions, because sometimes you're in the call, you don't remember certain things. We can do in-call reminders. This is beta, this one, but it's pretty cool. So if you forget to ask somebody's email address, or if they're selling a house, towards the end of the call, we can remind the actual person who picked up the phone to say, hey, don't forget to ask if they have a house to sell. Because as we all know, seller leads and financial services are worth a fortune. So we can collect these missed opportunities post-call, we can send them to somebody, or in fact, if those opportunities are actually not missed, and you've said, I'm going to book an appointment for you with our broker, 3 o'clock on Thursday, we can actually inject that into a CRM system in real time. So we can also deliver details pre-call, so when you actually pick up the phone, it will say, this is James calling about the £1.4 million flat in Arundel Gardens in Notting Hill. So when you answer that call, you're educated immediately. We can push this data to external systems as well. We can send it through whatever we want, but a lot of the times people don't have those systems in front of them because they're walking around with a mobile phone. So we tend to work with different levels of technology. We work with automotive as well, and it's very difficult getting anything high-end in there. A lot of car dealers don't like to use computers. So 90% of people dislike bots, but mostly because they don't work properly. They don't help. They don't answer the questions. And so we like to look at it as a balance between availability of humans and the quality of the bot. And the scope is key. So booking bot is a really good example. We've had these for a long time. It's really easy to build because it's a small scope. It's looking for how many people, what date, what time, balancing that against availability. General conversation bots, very difficult, because you have to be available. Like an LLM is designed to tell you history, jokes, et cetera, It's not really that accurate because of the scope. So when you actually shrink the scope, you can get a much more impressive bot. So we also believe that you can target existing automated systems, which is an easy foot in the door for AI. You don't need to do something crazy and flashy, but these are two examples that we're going after at the moment. So an IVR is key press. Press 1 for sales, press 2 for lettings. We have some customers who have 20 stages in an IVR. So if you think people hate bots, they despise IVRs. The hang-up rates are through the roof. So you can replace this with a conversational IVR, which actually prompts and asks questions. Again, it's a limited option model, so it's fast. It doesn't have to wait 3 seconds while it goes away and pulls something back. You can actually have a proper conversation. You can, for example, with one of our customers, they have the 20 options. You can base this on the 20 options, and if somebody asks a question it hasn't heard before, it can then reach out to an external system using RAG or reach out to an LLM, pull that back in, and then self-learn, because it can say, we've heard this other question 5 times. It's not in our database. What should we do about it? And in terms of impact, a good example of this, we have a case study where we have a British restaurant who has increased their revenue by £10 million by just allowing people to book tables when no one answers the phone. Literally, no one answers the phone, goes to the bot, they book a table. It's very simple. If there's no human available, it's better than nothing. Voicemail is the next one. Everybody hates voicemails. Most people don't listen to them. Most people don't reply to them. But some of our customers have 60% of calls going to voicemail, 40% during business hours. So there's 2 ways to address this. One is with our system, which is an actual conversational bot, which is designed to ask the right questions. We want to know what property you're interested in, what's your name, what's your email address, what's your phone number, who were you speaking to before, are you a new customer, etc. So it can ask the right questions and package that up into an email, an SMS, insert into a CRM system, whatever. But I know that most people here don't actually control the end user's voicemail. So we can also use external voicemails. And we don't even have to record a call to know it went to voicemail, because we can tell by the media waves that it's a one-sided conversation. So we know this went to a voicemail. When it's recorded, though, we can transcribe, summarize, classify, suggest, and pump it into CRM integration. Again, similar thing, pull out names and addresses, dates and times, bookings made, any requests in particular, summarize it in 1 sentence. So you can look at that, you can immediately take action on it, you can track if it's been responded to. We have another customer that does this sort of thing with us in automotive, and they found out that it takes on average 6 days for people to reply, and 25% of people do not get a reply at all. So our data has enabled them to push harder on the partners that they use and the customers they have to respond, because again, it damages their brand, because they're the ones who are seen as the one passing the lead on. So they don't complain about the end business usually, they complain about where they got that details from. So to wrap up, there's a lot happening. So legally, there are tons of things happening. In California, they just bounced back the new AI law, but it will come again. There's laws changing in every country, and technically, this is incredibly rapid. There's also a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of things you do not want to touch. So be very careful what you actually play with and what data you put into those systems, and be very careful about privacy, security. Hallucination is real. A Gen AI is designed to generate fake content. It will do it, and it will pretend it's real. And don't rush, and make sure you're improving the customer experience, because a lot of people are just slapping AI on everything. They're building these things which are awful, they don't work properly, and they're actually making the customer experience worse for a little soundbite to say, we now use AI. There's so many tools which have AI powered on them, which have nothing to do with AI, or they're a much worse customer experience than they were originally. So don't rush, and that's me done.
Thank you, Ryan. I always like those insights. Bring up the questions, please. I don't know if we have any, but if we don't have any,
It's down over here, so you're not looking for it later. It's going to be right there.
yeah, thank you very much. I'll be wondering where that thing has gone. Okay, don't know if we've got any questions, but bring up the blank screen. If we don't, here we hear. Care to name any bad examples of AI where people have rushed?
IBM went to market with an oncology LLM. It was in 2016. And it got $60-something million of training data put into it. And it was canned after about a month because it gave very bad advice. So they were really endangering people's health. So that's a really good example of what not to do. But also there's so many things which used to be just like, here, you can generate an image or select an image, and now it has AI powered, and it does the same thing. Exactly the same thing, only they made it slightly more complicated because they're trying to put this little text box in so you can free type, and then they're pushing it to ChatGPT, which takes longer to come back to search the images they already have to provide you with an image you could have just found with a simple search before.
Right. So given that, what's a good example in any industry of AI being applied?
Slow. So again, like, spell check, great example of something which slowly improves as it goes. So they didn't just come out and just do immediately auto prompt and say, this is what you must mean. They started out with underlining words, then they decided they were going to actually auto-correct and then auto-prompt. So there's a lot of things where we've seen some really cool examples, and where it's not critical, right? So you've got a lot of chatbot stuff, which is great, it's entertaining, it's fun, but when you put it into medicine, it's a different thing entirely, right? So you've got a lot of really good examples of things which are fun, games which are cool. Some of the new stuff coming out from ChatGPT is amazing too, like the conversational bots, they're really, really cool. But it's difficult to see because there's so much bad and so much good, but I think we're still, as I say, in the middle of this, towards the tail end of that hype cycle where there's just so much chat and not much power.
I want to talk about the one up top there, which is call centers and customer support. Because every business here, anyone who's got a customer has an outbound call center probably to deal with customers, sales, etc., and has inbound to deal with the crap.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, the opportunity to make your customer happy. Right? How do you see AI really fitting into that? You talked about and I can't remember the three-letter acronym, but the beep, 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 press 2.
IVR.
IVR, yeah. Thank you. We talked about IVR as being, you lose customers and you lose people in a heartbeat. So how should we think about applying AI into this sort of world of call centers and customer support?
I think you should look at the Industrial Revolution and look at what happened there. We took away all the menial work and replaced it with machines. AI is doing the opposite. It's creating art. It's creating beautiful writing and songs. Those are the things we should be focused on. So you want the AI to take the garbage work away, the trivial hard work, and you want us to be freed up to do the fun stuff. But the opposite has actually happened in this hype cycle where actually we're basically enabling AI to do the fun stuff while we do the trivial. So I think it will happen, but I think, again, it's more about augmentation. So you take away that layer of trivial work, and you can prompt and help humans, take away the base stuff, and then anything which is difficult comes along. And in a perfect example, we have customers who used to have 1% of calls listened to by 8 people. Now, we have 100% of calls scored, ranked, and flagged, and those 8 people will listen to the special cases. They don't need to listen to every single call, and their job becomes better, it becomes more rewarding, and it's just a higher-end job. Yep. So the more we replace the lower-level work with the higher-end work, the better, as far as I'm concerned, and the better for most people. But I don't think it's going to replace. I think it's going to augment.
Okay, and I think that's the key word. This is augmentation. By the way, Simon Bray, whoever's here somewhere, got me onto a podcast called The Shell Game. If you haven't heard of it, go listen to it. It's fascinating about I can't remember where the guy is from now, but he trains an AI with his voice and then teaches it, and then he has interactions with his wife. And he plays the interactions, and then it starts to interact with call centers and so on. And you can see how it's working on his behalf.
Oh, cool.
But it also looks at what goes right and what goes wrong. So check it, it's called The Shell Game. Okay?
That's layering as well. So you can create your own sort of virtual, we were talking about this yesterday. You can create your own little LLM, which is specific to you, and then it can reach out to other LLMs, like Travel LLM. You can have all these different bespoke layers.
Yes, so we have a lot of customization. One last question is, when you make the KPIs available to real estate agents, what do they do with it, really? Do they really react on it? With percentage, do they actually pay extra to the portal who provided it?
Yeah, because we can actually prove that it's changing or not. So we do, I mean, a perfect example is we had real estate agents telling us that 100% of people were asked if they had a house to sell or if they needed a mortgage. Turned out it was 13%. So once we start to actually display that and you realize how many millions of pounds of revenue are lost in that instance, they do take advantage of that and they start to actually behave in the same way as the thing I was talking about. Response rates was six days. That's now down to about 2 days. So it's not perfect, but it definitely improves. And when you can measure, you can actually continuously beat somebody over the head. You don't expect perfect. But it is, as long as the data is made clearly legible and it's simple, right? You don't want to overload with like all of this data. You say, here's the one thing you need to do. You need to pick up the phone.
Right.
Or respond to people.
And it goes back to that call center example. You said the people who are physically dealing with calls are now dealing with the exceptions, not the norm.
Well, even the restaurant booking thing I mentioned, they're dealing with tables. They're not answering the phone for bookings when they're busy, so they don't have to. We just take that away from them. £10 million of additional revenue.
Okay. Fantastic. Ryan, thank you very much for sharing
Thank you.
your thoughts. Excellent.
Come to drinks tonight as well and come and get some bottles.